So I watched a conference report's video on the evolution of consciousness, and then a response to it by I think his name was Magic Cat. I think who's been making these videos on the anti-civ critique, which I thoroughly disagree with, but I've been enjoying the videos nonetheless. Um, anyway, I mean, conference report is raising a very, I think, obvious objection to spiral dynamics and the whole idea of evolutionary consciousness and how it just kind of flatters the ego. It says, "Oh yeah, you're more advanced than everyone else. You're better than everyone else." Um, and that's a valid point. And I do kind of I always kind of felt it was a bit cheap of Ken Wilber to say that if you're interested in spiral dynamics, then you're probably at an integral level of consciousness. I think that was I was kind of called bullshit on that, and I thought there's definitely some people who would get into it because it flatters them and makes them feel better than everyone else. But I would say that if you get into integral because it makes you feel better than everyone else, then you're missing the whole point. Um, when you say that uh, the consciousness unfolds from pre-conventional to conventional to post-conventional, uh, that's not saying that post-conventional is better than conventional is better than pre-conventional. It's saying that post-conventional transcends and includes conventional and pre-conventional consciousness. Animistic consciousness doesn't. It isn't that you go from animistic to mythic to rational, and each one is overthrowing the previous one. No, each one transcends and includes its predecessor. That's what a holon is about. Um, yeah, so, and so the idea that by talking about the advancement of consciousness or the evolution of consciousness, um, they're just talking about that it's just about being better than the previous stages. It could be called better, but only because it transcends and includes the previous stages. Uh, so so if someone is saying that the animistic consciousness is wrong, then that's not a very integral statement. The way of looking at it from integral level is to say that animism, that the animistic level of consciousness is telling us something important that we ought to integrate into our being, and it is necessary for the next stages. And there's a lot of talking about it as you know as linear, but it's actually called spiral dynamics because you go on one end, you spiral out, you get further out. So it's not a circle, but it's not a line either. It's you go between agency and community, between sort of individualizing and communalizing levels of consciousness. Um, each one kind of further out and more inclusive than its predecessor. And so that's why one way of talking about it is just to talk about it as holarchy rather than hierarchy. And I mean, when I talk about like integrals to other people, I generally don't bring up Ken Wilber first. I mean, they may bring it up, but I usually talk about first about the other developmentalists, uh, you know, a cognitive development has been noticed in children going back to Freud, and then Piaget, and all these other developmentalists, and then other developmentalists who noticed cognitive development continuing into adulthood, like Abraham Maslow, Claire Graves, Eric Erikson, Carol Gilligan, Lawrence Kohlberg. You know, um, and I mean it's and you may disagree with the precise way that spiral dynamics dices up the categories, and any model like that is necessarily going to be overly simplistic, but it seems to me like I mean I can look back at these stages and say, oh yeah, I remember when I was like that, or I remember it unfolds in this kind of order because each stage is inclusive of its predecessor. Um, and so yeah, I do think that consciousness, maybe talking about evolving consciousness it can lead to some disagreements. And I certainly I would talk more about cognitive development. Um, and but I mean, I think talking about evolution of consciousness is less confusing if you talk about it on the collective level. I mean, I know that this themagikat guy who responded to conference report was saying that likes to talk about how much better hunter gatherers were, how they got together. But the point is their sort of world, their entire world ended at the tribe. They were uh, their worldview was inclusive of others in the tribe, and everything else was completely other, alien to them. Um, yeah, and so then the tribe expands to a nation, and the nation is held together by common myths, and then we go into the world centric, rationalistic worldview, where you're able to take perspectives outside of those of your own nation, or whatever. And so that's really all I was saying is it gets more inclusive the further you go on. Um, and I mean, it's like there was a time when people in Athens thought that, okay, only if only Athenian males are human and everyone else, you know, they're beneath us. But then at some point they said, oh, okay, oh well, actually, all Greeks are human, but the Persians, those guys are evil, and they're not uh, they're inhuman, and so but that was still an advancement in consciousness development because their sphere uh, of care expanded, um, and so and so that's been going on ever since then, and I think it's interesting. Robert Bright has written a lot on the same kind of ideas without any apparent reference to spiral dynamics or Ken Wilber. Um, though he seems to come at it from a sort of evolutionary, from a sort of I guess evolutionary psychology point of view, where he basically says that where he basically traces the level of development to self interest, what he calls non-zero sumness. Um, But anyway, I guess as interested in this, partly conference reports video inspired that in me, and partly because I've started rereading Ken Wilber's book on sex ecology, spirituality, because I remember how transformative that book was for me when I first read it, and I thought, maybe I want to try rereading it and see what I get out of it now, with where I am now versus when I was like first getting into it. So anyway, that's my thoughts for now. Peace.